Standing before a forest of live broadcast cameras at the locked iron gates of Althorp, Charles Spencer stuns the entire UK by finally reading out Diana's true last will, a hidden document the royal family thought they had successfully erased 26 years ago. For decades, this fiercely protective brother and guardian of her legacy held his peace, watching helplessly as his nephews fractured under the suffocating weight of the crown. The world was told the princess's estate was neatly settled in 1997, leaving behind nothing but inherited wealth and tragic memories. But as Charles Spencer grips a yellowed, heavy parchment secured with a cracked black seal, his trembling voice reading out Diana's last will paralyzes a watching nation, revealing a breathtaking masterstroke that brings Buckingham Palace to an absolute, terrified standstill. What unimaginable secret did the princess hide in this document that Charles Spencer is now reading out? Why did she command her brother to wait until this exact, volatile moment in history to stun the entire UK? And what impossible, heartbreaking ultimatum has she just issued from beyond the grave to force her two warring sons back together? Exactly 48 hours before that earth-shattering broadcast, the tires of an unmarked black sedan crunched against the gravel of Althorp House, shattering the quiet of the 13,000-acre Northamptonshire estate. Charles Spencer stood in his mahogany-lined study, surrounded by centuries of aristocratic wealth, priceless Renaissance oil paintings, and ancient tapestries that suddenly felt entirely meaningless. An elderly man was escorted inside by private security. He wasn't a royal courtier. He was Arthur Pendleton, a retired senior partner at a hyper-discreet Swiss wealth management firm, his bespoke charcoal suit practically radiating unshakable, generational power. Without a word of pleasantry, Pendleton withdrew a heavy, yellowed parchment envelope from his leather briefcase. It was secured not with the traditional red wax of the crown, but with a stark, cracked black seal. "For 26 years, we have guarded this," Pendleton said, his voice barely above a whisper, as he placed it on the polished antique desk. Charles stared at the seal, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. Memories of September 1997 violently flashed in his mind. The suffocating scent of lilies at Westminster Abbey, the heavy weight of a grief-stricken nation, and his own echoing vow at the pulpit to protect her blood family from the crushing machinery of the monarchy. "Why now, Arthur?" Charles asked, his voice shaking. "It has been decades. The palace lawyers swore every document was seized." "Her Royal Highness knew they would try," Pendleton replied, his eyes filled with a heavy, ancient sorrow. "She did not use British solicitors. She utilized a Swiss blind trust with a temporal clause. She instructed my firm to hold this document in absolute secrecy. It was only to be delivered on the exact day the sovereign who stripped her of her HRH title was no longer on the throne, and her eldest son became the direct heir." Charles's hands trembled. He broke the black wax. The sharp snap echoed in the silent room. He pulled out the fragile parchment and read the first line. His reading glasses slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. Utterly paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his sister's secret, Charles lunged for his desk phone. He frantically dialed 2 numbers, the direct, encrypted line to Prince William. It rang once. Then, his hand froze. A chilling realization washed over him. The palace courtiers still monitored the royal switchboards. If he spoke a word of this privately, the firm would deploy their fixers and lock this document in a vault forever, just as they had done with her letters. Charles violently slammed the receiver down. He couldn't make the call. He had to do the one thing Buckingham Palace feared most. He had to go live to the world. Within hours of the broken black seal, the impenetrable walls of Althorp were breached. The quiet, nervous betrayal of a young estate guard's encrypted text message had instantly alerted the crown. A silver Bentley Continental tore up the gravel driveway, entirely bypassing protocol. Out stepped Lord Thomas Stirling, a high-ranking Buckingham Palace fixer whose immaculate, bespoke Savile Row suit hid the ruthless, invisible machinery of the monarchy. Stirling did not knock. He invaded the sanctuary of Charles's study, his cold eyes instantly locking onto the shattered black wax on the antique desk. "You are playing a very dangerous, foolish game, Charles," Stirling clipped, his aristocratic accent dripping with thinly veiled malice. "Any document bearing the signature of the late Princess of Wales is, by archaic royal decree, the exclusive property of the Crown Estate. Hand it over." Charles gripped the edge of his desk, the yellowed parchment burning heavily in his breast pocket. He looked past the threatening fixer, his gaze catching a stunning, life-sized oil portrait of Diana, bathed in the fading afternoon light. A vivid, suffocating flashback seized him. The freezing, opulent corridors of Kensington Palace in the early 90s. His sister weeping silently on a gilded velvet sofa as royal handlers systematically dictated her schedule, erasing her independence. They had taken her freedom in life. He would not let them seize her final act of defiance in death. "The Crown has no jurisdiction on my property, Thomas," Charles said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, unwavering calm. Stirling's lips curled into a predatory smile as he pulled out a pristine, embossed palace checkbook. "The firm is prepared to quietly fund the Spencer family charities for the next 50 years. A limitless, untraceable endowment. Give me the envelope." "My sister's voice is not for sale," Charles spat, aggressively pressing the silent alarm under his desk to summon his loyal, veteran security detail. As Stirling was forcibly escorted out of the study, his phone violently buzzed. He glanced at the glowing screen, stopping in the doorway to look back at Charles with a chilling, triumphant smirk. "You think her sons will thank you for this little broadcast tomorrow? Go live, Charles. You are about to destroy them both." The morning wind whipped fiercely across the iron gates of Althorp as Charles faced a blinding sea of international broadcast lenses, fulfilling the terrifying promise of the Black Seal. Millions of viewers around the globe leaned closer to their screens. Inside Buckingham Palace, courtiers braced for a catastrophic, scandalous attack on the new king. But as Charles delicately unfolded the fragile parchment, the weapon Diana had forged wasn't scandal. It was an untouchable, staggering act of grace. "If you are reading this, Charles, the dust of my departure has long settled, and my boys are men," Charles read, his voice echoing over the loudspeakers. "The world believes I left them only money and jewelry, but I knew the establishment would try to pull them apart. I knew the Crown would isolate them." Charles paused, a painful flash of memory washing over him. He saw his sister pacing her apartment in her final year, terrified of the future, quietly funneling the vast majority of her £17 million divorce settlement into Arthur Pendleton's untraceable trust. Thanks to decades of aggressive, shielded Swiss compounding, that fund had skyrocketed to over £140 million. But the wealth wasn't for royal coffers. With this trust, Diana secretly purchased a sprawling, 5,000-acre private estate in the Scottish Highlands, directly bordering the royal retreat of Balmoral, Charles announced, sending a shocked, audible gasp rippling through the press corps. She named it the Sanctuary. It is fully funded to become the world's largest impenetrable haven for victims of domestic abuse. The pacing slowed to a breathless halt. "But the trust remains entirely frozen," Charles continued, staring fiercely into the main camera lens, bypassing the palace fixers and speaking directly to his warring nephews. "The legal lock can only be broken by the two executors she named, William, Harry. You must walk into the sanctuary together. You must cross the threshold side by side, without your royal aids, without your titles, and sign the charter as brothers." From beyond the grave, Diana had anticipated the royal fracture and orchestrated a flawless masterstroke. She had publicly backed the monarchy into a corner, giving her sons an impossible choice. Let their mother's monumental humanitarian legacy die, or permanently obliterate their bitter global feud. Charles meticulously folded the yellowed paper, slipping it back into his breast pocket as he looked out over the stunned, utterly silent crowd. "Your mother has spoken," Charles whispered, his words broadcasting to every corner of the earth. "The ball is in your court."